here with Ron and Romeo. And folks, something incredible happened today. And I'm not talking about the arraignment of the president. I mean, we've seen that played out. This is the third time. What I mean is Roman was early today.
I'm so stupid. Look, I'm never going to answer.
You are never going to live that down. Never.
No, you will not. So anyway, folks, it's good to hear, to be back in front of y'all. And hopefully y'all enjoyed our conversation last week. We got into some pretty deep stuff. And today we're going to go back. We're going to circle back on that because there were a lot of questions that were left unanswered. And, if you're going to talk about a problem, you should also offer solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to focus on solutions today. So last week, we had our guest to my left, Mama C, who is pretty well known around Gynesis Radio, one of the founding member of the Ladies Room, correct?
The Ladies Room, Sister Chat, and now the Sistership.
And an author.
Mm-hmm.
An author,
Right.
yes. I have 5 published books.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Yep, and I'm working on more.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think when people retire, they need to understand that you still have something to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever it is God is guiding you to do, you do it. And you'll find that you have something very important to contribute and a legacy to leave,
Mm-hmm.
so that people will be able to not just remember you, but remember the goodness that you brought to the world.
Mhm.
Hopefully, you brought to the world,
Mhm.
because that's why we're here, to bring
Mhm.
goodness to the world.
Ashe.
Very well said. Mm-hmm.
So, last week I asked a question. Are women in general angry with men? And are Black women in particular angry with Black men? And I was a little surprised by the answers or the response I got from the ladies to my left and to my right. They were more pro-man than I expected. I think over time, well, let me back up. A lot of Black women are looked upon as being the angry, sullen, bitter woman. And I can kind of understand why that might be. But I think what happens over time, you lose that anger, you lose the bitterness, and you begin to evolve and look at things very, very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Some
the
of
ladies
us.
with me, have reached that point where they've gotten beyond the anger, the frustration, if you ever felt it, right? And it's something we all feel
Mm-hmm.
at times, it's natural. And in our relationships, certainly, we're going to have some disagreements with our significant other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen.
Right.
But it just seemed that there was so much anger in our relationships when you see some of the news coverage where you see, our sisters being killed, being brutalized. And, I think Malcolm X said it best. He said the Black woman is the most unprotected, disrespected woman on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that probably in the early 60s. And here we are, 50 plus years later,
Mm.
and the situation has only gotten worse. And we talked about this, about the woman in Harlem, I guess it was a couple of years back. Some guys, or one guy in particular, had offered to buy her a bottle of wine. And she refused. And the guy got frustrated with her, got angry.
Mm-hmm.
4 of them attacked their sister in the streets of Harlem. Nobody came to her defense. So for us Black men, how can we be respected on this planet if we will not respect and protect our women? How can we be? How can anyone take us seriously and respect us as men if we leave our communities vulnerable to outsiders to come in, and even us to brutalize and disrespect and denigrate our women? So I was really surprised that y'all are like enlightened. You know what I mean? And you, right, said on multiple occasions last week, well, I know women are gonna be mad at me, but I'm kind of with the guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something that struck a chord with me. And I thought about it this week. You said that sisters are quote unquote losing because white women are saying, okay, I'm with it. Whereas black women are coming with a list of things that they ain't going to do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I can see where that's going to lead a brother to look for the affection of someone else.
And they're not just coming with a list of things they're not going to do. They're coming with that list and still an expectation of what they're calling a high value man.
Mm-hmm.
So that means they're coming with a list of, this is what I'm not going to do, but this is what I expect you to do.
Right.
I don't know who's looking for one-sided relationships.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should be looking for a relationship where there's some reciprocity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Black women need to do some self-introspection. And I think women like myself and Mama C, we have to start to tap the younger sisters on the shoulder and say, it's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cool. And you're either gonna end up being the cat lady, you're gonna be the cat lady, or either you're gonna be 500 pounds and alone.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, nobody's looking for a relationship like that.
Right.
So when you look at the number of Black women who are single, they have to start to wonder, could this possibly be because of some of my outlooks on things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? If they would stop and think that way, maybe they can begin to turn around their situation.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening is that they become so one-sided with respect to what they consider a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and never mind a healthy relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that they've lost sight of what's going on with them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women, Black women, are picking the same man in a different body.
Yes.
Why? Because they're the same woman.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't done any introspective analysis
No.
of their own mindset,
Mm-hmm.
their own beliefs, their own behavior. And so what happens is they go into another relationship. They just constantly on the lookout. They're looking for a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not looking to prepare themselves for that relationship that they want.
There you go.
Okay? So you've got to do the work. Like I said last week, I was in my 50s when I realized, and I have to say,
and that was just last week.
And that was just last week. Yeah. I was in my 50s when I realized why I picked the men I picked in my life. And it was because I was still holding on to and living by survival skills that I had to incorporate into my life as a young woman, as a young girl.
Well, let me ask you something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, both of y'all said that the women need to do their work.
Yes,
right?
They do need to do
What
their
do
work.
the men need to do?
The men need to do work too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
And-
Because both
Mhm.
sides are working from a skewed perspective.
There you go.
Mhm.
Okay? So both the men and the women. If a man is looking for something more than just some booty, okay, then if he's looking for a long-term, healthy, loving relationship, then he has to ask himself, well, how do I get that?
Mm-hmm.
Am I prepared to give what I want? I have to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And until we get minds together, we're just going to keep repeating cycles that'll keep us in the same old deadbeat,
Mm-hmm.
rabbit hole situation.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Never getting any better.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. So I just think that what you said about tapping the young ladies on the shoulder and having that conversation with them, I think that, guys of our age, our generation, we need to reach out to the younger generation, because a lot of stuff I see from young men is disturbing to me.
Mm-hmm.
The way they're very disrespectful
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of the sisters, right?
Mhm.
You know, years ago, and I'm talking in the 70s, we talked about in terms of sister and brotherhood, right? You addressed a woman as ma'am, miss, or sister. There was not that level of disrespect when now it's just a 5-letter word that starts with B. And then there doesn't seem to be any connection between he and her. If you love that woman, you love the child she produces.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's hard to walk away from something you love.
Yeah.
But if you have no connection to her, you have none to the child. So I just think that there is so much that these young men need to learn. And I think one of the problems that we have, male or female, is being open to learning, to listening.
I was getting ready to say that's one of the
Right.
biggest challenges. They
Right.
don't want to listen. And if you're older, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You see
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right.
So listening is one of the biggest, I don't like the word problem, but I'm going to use it. It's one of the biggest problems when it comes to our communicating with one another. Everybody wants to talk. Nobody wants to listen.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the biggest obstacle
Right.
in our community because
Yeah.
we don't listen.
Yeah.
We don't listen. We know everything.
Mhm.
I think we have it all figured out. When I just think back, like at 35, I didn't have it figured out.
I sure did.
And that was just last week.
And that was just
Last
last week.
week.
Exactly. I have it all
Dribble.
figured out at 55,
That-
65.
that's what I'm saying.
You know, I'm heading
Right.
towards 70,
Right.
and I'm still trying to figure some
That's
stuff
what I'm
out.
saying.
Right.
You know,
So,
it's always a learning
but
situation.
you're open to learn.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing.
That's
You
the
have to be
thing.
open to learn.
Absolutely, Renee.
I said because my partner's always saying, well, you have to be responsible to teach the women, but the women have to be receptive
Mhm.
to hear what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Because I really used to think that the women who didn't get it, I thought that they were the outliers. And then he kept saying, no, they're not the outlier. You're the outlier.
Mhm.
And then you start to really listen to them and you're like, damn,
Mhm.
well, maybe I am the outlier. So
Mm.
we have to though, because the only way our community is going to heal, women are birthing new people.
Right.
So as much as I want to say the men are the head and they have to be responsible to fix it, you bringing forth life, bring forth healthy life,
Mhm.
and teach them the right way. So even if this generation of men is still what they consider to be dysfunctional, then the next generation maybe they won't be.
But see, that's one of the challenges or obstacles we have, because bringing forth healthy life is going to require balance. The male, masculine, and the feminine energy.
Can you say that again? Because that balance
It
piece
requires
is
the
big.
balance, right?
Mhm.
So it requires the presence of a man.
Mhm.
And I got to tell you, looking back over my childhood, I realized there's a distinct difference between myself and some of the guys I grew up with whose father was not in the home,
Mhm.
right? A distinct difference learning from a man. It's like when the lion roars, people listen. You hear the roar of the lion. And, I find that with women and their relationships with their sons is very different from the relationship with the daughter. The son is taught to be dependent, whereas the daughter is taught, no, you need to have your own. You cannot rely on him to take care of you. There's a lack of trust there, right? That it's not so much transmitted to the boys, right? The girls are learning cooking and cleaning and all of those things that are necessary to be a partner in a relationship. What are we teaching our sons? What information are we giving them to bring into the relationship and bring this to the table? So, when you have this healthy life, it's hard to do that when it's just mom alone.
It's very hard.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
very hard to
Right.
do that,
Mhm.
because when you have so many responsibilities that are weighing on your shoulders and you're trying to handle it all, we can't do but so much. We
Mhm.
do the best that we can, but we need to have our men in our homes. Our children need their fathers. Okay.
Mhm.
A boy learns how to be a man, not necessarily from a woman, but from another man.
Mhm.
Girls learn how to have a healthy relationship with a man with her dad.
That's right.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so we have too many households where there are single women, no men in the home.
Mhm.
And in some cases, fathers are not being allowed to interact with their children
Mhm.
by vengeful women
Mm-hmm.
who are angry and don't want to have the fathers anywhere near the children
Mhm.
or them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that. And we go back, and when you talked about the women balance and healthy relation, a woman can't have healthy children or raise healthy children if she's not healthy.
That's right.
You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
You can't
That's right.
teach what you haven't, what you don't know, and what you haven't worked
Mhm.
toward achieving
Mhm.
and maintaining
Mhm.
and evolving to those higher levels of awareness and understanding and growth.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is you got a lot of unhealthy women having children,
Mhm.
and those children are being raised by women who are angry, who in some cases don't really want a parent,
Who are broken.
who are
They're
broken,
women.
yeah,
Mhm.
broken women.
Mhm.
So you can't expect that those broken women are gonna, because they have a baby or babies,
Mhm.
are going to be able to teach their children to be healthy and strong and all that good stuff
Mhm.
that is essential for their positive growth and development. Yeah.
I think that in order to fix a situation, you gotta have to get to the root of the problem.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me that at some point there was a breaking point.
Mhm.
Being born in the 60s, I can remember, of course, unity in the Black community. I can remember the Black Power movement. But it seems that somewhere around maybe the 80s is when things began to turn.
I think before then, I think when Martin Luther King
Mm-hmm.
was assassinated,
Okay.
everything started to break down. It was slow at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, it just boom. It was like everybody went their separate ways. Nobody cared about anybody. Nobody was saying, "Hey, come on, we gotta keep this thing together. We gotta take care of each other. We gotta keep moving forward and growing as a body of people."
Mhm.
When I say the 80s, from my perspective, in the 70s, there was still the Black Power movement, right? Yes, there were forces at work, COINTELPRO and so many other government sanctioned operations to destroy the Black community. By the 1970s, there was not total destruction. We were well on our way, but it was not total and complete. By the 1980s,
Is the crack epidemic.
and even before that, we began to abandon everything that we had in the 70s. The hairstyles began to change, right? This clothing began to change, right? We went from, as my brother's wearing a dashiki, to wearing, sweatshirts and hoodies and things of that nature. We kind of got away from all, I guess, cultural things or things
That's right.
cultural. By the mid 80s, what happened was we were deep in the throes of the crack epidemic.
Mhm.
And I think another thing that really affected us and still does to this day. And I know we're going to get some backlash because they say it's part of the culture, but I want to say hip hop. Initially, listen, I remember the onset of hip hop from the outset, but over the years, the lyrics have been decidedly negative, decidedly misogynistic, decidedly violent. And this is what our kids are growing up listening to. So when you hear on repeat, be this and be that and kill this and shoot that and sell this drug, does it normalize things for us? Does it make it okay for us to go out and sell drugs and slaughter one another and no remorse, no sympathy?
Well, respect went out the window.
Mhm.
The whole sense of morality that existed
Mhm.
went out the window. And if you have no sense of morality, if there's no respect for yourself, how do you respect somebody else?
Well, you can't.
You can't. It's
Simply
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to go back to respecting ourselves and loving ourselves, learning how to love ourselves. What does it mean to love? And a lot of people don't even know. They think of love as the feeling.
I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to tell you what it is.
All right.
Love is when you reach that place where there's just this ultimate understanding. When I understand you and you understand me, that's love. That's love, right?
Absolutely.
It's not a feeling,
Absolutely.
right? It's not emotional. It's none of those things. And so I think that maybe the place to start is to remove that. We've separated like love from being in love, right? We've separated it. There's no separation. There's just love, right? I understand you. We've reached that place where all your flaws, all the ugly parts of you, I understand. I understand why they're ugly. I understand why you have insecurities. And in turn, you understand the same things about me, right? And then what happens is there are no more issues between the two people because I understand, right? There's no in love. We got to remove that, right? That in love thing, because that's where this whole thing. You hear people fall in and out of love. People fall in and out of love. No, people don't fall. When you love somebody, you don't fall out of love. You just love them.
Right.
Even when you walk away, if you walk away, you don't stop loving them.
Absolutely. And you don't seek to hurt them.
No.
You move on.
Yes.
Anyone who seeks to hurt someone, they claim that they didn't love them. There was something else going on. And if they don't understand what that something else is, they go into the next relationship with that something else. And the same consequences will be the result.
You know what I think? I think that now you have a definition of love, and you have one as well, but a lot of people really don't have an understanding. And you will find that even though you're talking to somebody who is an adult, you would be surprised what some adults do not know. So you probably experienced this in the mosque. You have classes, MGT classes, FOI classes, and you'd be surprised how many young brothers had to be told, no, brother, you can't beat your woman.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
They had to be told that?
Yes. Yes. No, brother, you have to go out and work and earn a living to support
take care of your family.
Family. Because if you came from a situation where you didn't have a daddy at home, where are you going to learn these things? Who's going to teach it to you?
There was no healthy role model.
Right. So when you come into the mosque, you come in and you're like, okay, well, I'm bringing my perspective of the world.
Oh, so you mean they came in thinking that it was okay? It's not like they were there or
no.
They just had to be desensitized.
There you go. They had to be
deprogrammed.
There you go. To understand that
exactly,
this is not a healthy, normal relationship. And for the most part, and if you think about it, throughout your life and the relationships you have all of them been healthy?
No.
Probably not.
Look,
No.
I said no.
Probably
No.
not, right?
No.
No.
And a lot of times people bring dysfunction to a relationship because they don't know any better.
Mhm.
If you grew up in a house where you have addiction, alcohol, drugs, you have violence, well, after a while you become desensitized to it.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And it's the norm. It becomes the norm
It
for
becomes a norm, and you go and you perpetuate what you saw at home.
Mhm.
Well, if my mother and father were, my mother's boyfriends were fighting and
you.
carrying on, well,
Mhm.
I guess that's the thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And until we take ownership of the response of being responsible and accountable, nothing will change. We've got to be responsible for acknowledging our own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to, and you try to bring the attention to the person who you're trying to tap on the shoulder. They get attitude with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's very difficult. So what I try to do is model behavior
Mhm.
that is healthy.
Mhm.
Now, it's not going to always work, but I'm not going to fuss and fight with you either.
Mhm.
Okay? I'm not going to let you break my peace or scramble my happiness.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
That's an exercise in futility, right? To constantly argue with somebody,
Yeah.
right? At some point, I'm not hearing you, you're not hearing me,
Right.
right? So all we're doing is just throwing words back and forth,
Back
and
and
none of it is really sinking in, and it becomes pointless. But I just think that from a perspective of a Black man, I must say that I am deeply disappointed in many of my brothers, deeply so. I understand that from the time slavery in this country ended, I know that there was a concerted effort to separate men from women, Black men from Black women, Black men from the community. I understand that, and I understand the reasons why. However, we're more than 150 years removed from the end of the transatlantic slave trade. And I understand the wounds are so deep, the psychological scars are still there. However, it's not like we have not had sound advice and we have not had leaders. You mentioned Dr. King. We've had Malcolm. We've had so many people that came to tell us, right, that we're on a pathway to destruction. And yet, here we are. I guess what's happening in America, I guess the Black community is a microcosm of that. In America, it is a race to the bottom. Donald Trump is, being arraigned for the third time on a slew of charges, and yet people still want him to occupy the White House.
Well,
right?
that also tells you how many absolutely crazy people there are in this country.
And we're part of that crazy group.
Yep, we are.
Because when you turn on the news and you see a multiple killing in Chicago, in Philly, it's not the Ku Klux Klan. It's us killing us. And there's no excuse for it. None. When I hear men talk about, well, I ain't trying to pay child support. Well, there's no excuse you can give me why you will not support your children, why you will place that responsibility on the state or the federal government to take care of children that you gave that, well, you impregnated this system.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's no excuse, okay? Because it does take two.
Absolutely.
And you can't come up with the excuse, well, she should have used birth control. I got pregnant with my daughter using an IUD that was in place there. Okay? They couldn't remove, since I decided to have the child, they couldn't remove it. When she was born, it came out on her forehead.
Oh.
Okay? So I was using birth control. Mm-hmm. So don't think that birth control is 100. It's not always 100%. Mm-hmm. Okay? So don't hand that excuse because, and it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen.
I just think that here, Ron, I'm always going to come with the opposing viewpoint, right?
Mhm.
Because I think we covered in another show how they painted a picture that our men are not taking care of their children,
Mhm.
and that's a fallacy. Most of them are. Of course, there's always some outlier. There's an outlier, right? But our men are taking care of our children. Our men are raising our children. I just want to make sure that that's not what we put out there. I don't want to perpetuate this stereotype that they've already created of who our men are, because that's the first thing that we have to do is dismantle the stereotypes that white America has created when it comes to people looking at our men. Statistics show our men are taking care of our children. They are. They are in the home, and the ones that are not in the home are still active in their kids' lives, right? So and we have some bing bongs, so to speak, but most of them are taking care of their kids. So,
Well, last week I said, right from the outset, that some of what men will hear last week and this week will not apply to them because you have those brothers, hardworking, dedicated brothers who are in their children's lives. Even sometimes when there's opposition, they're still there in their children's lives. So we're not talking about them. In fact, they're not the ones you're going to see, splash across the headlines. You're not going to see them on TV. You're going to see the other side.
You're talking about that small little percentage of men.
Unfortunately, that becomes reflective of who we are. Because people say, see, that's how they act. That's how they treat each other. That's how they treat their women. So even that's only 5% of the Black community, the perception is that it's a much larger percentage. So, I think that you're right, that we need to give props and respect where it's due, but we also need to try to correct and not reward bad behavior. If you want to go out here and you want to be involved in relationships with women, understand that there is responsibility that comes with that. And you shouldn't be let off the hook. I don't teach my son, to duck responsibility. I didn't do it. You didn't see your grandfather do it, and damn it, you're not going to do it. If you're going to be man enough to lay with this woman, if she becomes pregnant, that is your child, your responsibility. Don't pass off to anybody.
And then for the sisters, right? Raising the men. I raised 2 men, right? So what I would say to the sisters is, I get it that sometimes we're put in this position by default, right? Where we are trying to take care. We're the primary support system for young men, right? Oftentimes, and again by default. But I think that a good place for them to start is to come to the realization, because I hear so many women. I got into something with somebody I grew up with on Facebook, because she was wishing herself and other mothers a happy Father's Day.
Right.
And I responded and said, what are you talking about? Why are you doing that? Like you could be a great mother, you could be a phenomenal mother, but you can't be a father.
Right.
So don't do that. And it kind of takes the guys who are not present off the hook, because you're assuming the role of both people. I'm never gonna do that, because there are things that I cannot say to my sons, or things that my sons may not say to me, because I'm mom and not dad, right? So we have to be conscious of that, accept that, and then hold our sons accountable. I stayed consistent to do that with both my sons. So much so my mom used to say, you're so hard on them, but I needed to be hard on them because I was divorced. And I was determined that my 2 Black sons would not be statistics. Right. And so now I'm watching my older son, who now has a daughter, right? And now him and his wife got just wonderful parents. But I'm watching him and he's ready to hold her accountable too. And
Right.
that's kind of what we have to do.
Mhm.
We have to
Absolutely.
know our role, assume your role, and then just first and foremost make the kids accountable. And
Right.
then here's this other piece that I was just talking about when you pulled up. I was in the car talking about it,
Mhm.
saying that, you know, Black women, we keep going back to this, they're bitter and angry thing. And so we have to teach the sisters that it's okay to be feminine.
Mhm.
That's
Oh,
okay.
absolutely.
And if being feminine, because it requires some vulnerability, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But understand that if you are afraid to be feminine because you feel like you're going to be taken advantage of course you use wisdom. But if you're being taken advantage of because you're feminine, there's nothing wrong with you being feminine. You're just being feminine with the wrong
with
person.
the wrong person, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
You know, what I think is that for men, the only emotion you're going to see is anger,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
They're not going to show you vulnerability.
mm,
You're not going to see him cry.
mm.
He's never going to admit to you that he's afraid.
Do you think that he never does, Ron, or it just takes time? Because I've seen
I
some
think-
vulnerability, not overnight.
Right. Now, if you are part of his life where he feels so comfortable with you to let you in to those places where nobody else has ever been,
Mhm.
then you're going to see those things.
Mhm.
But for the most part, we don't show that. And I think in response, the feminine energy is also not showing that, right? Don't let him see you cry. Don't let him see you upset. And it's the same thing with the men. Man, listen, F that.
You know,
So Terry,
Don't you-
no. So Terry, are you okay with being vulnerable?
Absolutely.
Are you? I don't. What's your name?
My name is Kendall. How are you?
Kendall. How are you?
I'm
dear?
well, thank you.
That's good. Are you okay with being vulnerable?
Depends.
If she's the one.
If vulnerability is going to cost me, in other words, people have an advantage of taking advantage of you.
Mm-hmm.
So by me being vulnerable, if that's going to, by me being vulnerable, if it's going to cause you to take advantage of me, then no, you're not going to see that. And most men feel that someone's out to get them.
So
Someone's gonna take advantage of them.
when does that shift take place? When does that take place? Because we got to learn this.
Mhm.
When does the shift take place, Ron? Where you go from the wall being up to
Mhm.
saying, "Okay, I'm gonna let her in," because I might keep her.
Mhm.
So let me let her in a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you something, right? When you come to the realization that this is the woman you want to be with, that you want to bear your children, you want her to know who you are.
Okay, now you're
And you're
beyond the
going to-
childbearing years. Now we
Right. But during the course of your relationship, you're going to let her see all sides of you,
okay.
the strong and the weak, right? Because we talk about balance. Well, inside of every man, there is estrogen,
Mm-hmm.
there is feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
In this society, as crazy as it is, we try to suppress that.
Mm-hmm.
And now what we have is a suppression of the feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening in this country and around the world. You look at the news and the temperature is 115 degrees for like 30 days straight. People can't go in the water because it's too hot and the killer whales are attacking. Wildfires everywhere. It is an imbalance, right? The imbalance is in us and it's reflective of the imbalance in the universe. And unless we do something, we're in trouble.
well,
And we're in trouble in our communities, in our relationships.
absolutely. Well, I think people don't realize that the feminine energy is a superpower.
Hello. Bing bong.
Well, let me just tell you.
And both men and women have feminine energy.
Yes.
And when we learn the who, what, when, where, why, and how to's of
Mhm.
using
Mm-hmm.
that energy,
Mhm.
we find ourselves in a much, much better place.
Mhm.
But most people, the men in particular, and women to a large degree now, are looking at the feminine energy as though it's a poison.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna let you in on a secret. And I know some fellas are gonna disagree with me. But I think right? We've been told throughout history by men that God is a man. I think it is more possible that God is a woman, right?
Well, God.
Because God is a nurturer. We don't nurture. That's your job.
But do you remember?
Y'all are the sustainers. We don't feed the baby. Y'all do.
No, but remember, and we talked about this on another show.
Mhm.
What was that? The movie Boys in the Hood.
Right.
And Regina King is a young girl, and they're in the car, and they're talking about God. And as hard as she was in the car with the 40 in her hand, she's like, "How you know God is a man?
Right.
How you know God is not a woman? We don't know, right?"
Exactly. It's just what we, a lot of what we learn is because somebody told us. It's that way because I told you.
God is an energy.
Mm-hmm.
God is an energy form that encompasses both masculine and feminine energy. Okay? God works in us, with us, for us, and through us because that is an energy form. And any of us who learn how to love are emulating the power of God working through us, with us, and through us to the outside world. See, people don't understand. Everybody wants to make God a male or a female. God is an energy form that works in us, with us, for us, and through us. And the degree of that relationship with God is evident in how we treat each other. Okay? That's the bottom line. Everybody wants to make God. Then they got this white man who's supposed to be the image of God. Get the hell out of here.
Right.
Okay? I don't even want it. God is neither black nor white, nor brown nor green.
So
God is an energy form that exists within all of us.
That's what I was getting ready to say. So that means Ron is God.
Yes. We're all, everyone in this room has the God power within them. But the key is, are you using it? Do you recognize that? And has religion conditioned you to such a degree that you become warped in your ability to understand the God power? Okay?
We know the scripture says we are all God's sons of the Most High God, right? So yes, we all have that energy within us, the energy that created us. But at some point, we have lost it. We have fallen away from it, so that now we are reflections of more animalistic behavior than that of God, right? So, if you read in the scripture, it says that, God created, man and woman. By the end, I guess the book of Revelations, God is referring to people in terms of animals because of how far we had fallen away. And for us in the Black community, we have, to a great degree, like I said last week, during the horrors of slavery, we had two constant companions, a belief in a higher power and a Black woman. And at some point, we turned away from both. We no longer have that belief in a higher power. We believe in things.
We've been conditioned to turn away from both.
Right. But when do we break that cycle?
Absolutely.
When do we say, listen, this ain't working? We used to talk about that old time religion, but it kept us balanced.
It should. Well, okay.
I don't know about that.
I don't know about that either. Yeah, I caught the whole thing. I don't know about that either.
I was getting ready to come for you with that one.
Okay.
Now, it did not keep us balanced. It kept us bound, right? And so much of what you read in the Bible, right, was designed to keep you bound, right? Because they had to keep the slaves in order.
Yes.
Don't make me start running around the room.
Yes.
The energy is working in me.
Hello. So we cannot say that, it kept us balanced. What it did was it kept us controlled.
It kept us.
And
that was the purpose of it.
Yes.
But you know something? During that time, children go out in the park and play. You didn't have to worry about when your mother went out the door. Is my mama gonna make it back home
They could
today?
go out and play, and
Mhm.
the pastor could also take them in the back room, and all
And,
this stuff was
and
going
have,
on,
exactly,
and it was kept a
which was
secret,
going
right?
on a lot.
Okay,
Well,
okay,
okay.
okay.
Now that's not
okay.
what we're talking about, right?
But
That did happen, and it was a major problem, and it still remains a major problem in the Catholic Church, right?
because it was everybody was being controlled.
It's not just the Catholic Church; it's
No.
across the board.
It is.
Every
There's
religion.
a pastor
Okay, I don't
sleeping
care
with
what
half
you
the
call yourself,
church
a
and all
Baptist,
that.
a Presbyterian, or a Google Mongo. I don't care what you call yourself, what religion you call it.
Mhm.
Okay, it was
Mhm.
going on and continues to go on
Yes.
across the board.
Yes, but it was something we had, right? It was part of our morality system,
Yes,
and now we have no morality.
yes.
We have no spiritual guide nowadays because we've broken away from that. So what we get today is when you go to church, you're not taught about redemption, you're taught about prosperity.
Mhm.
A theology of prosperity. We just said, listen, they're collecting, they take up the offering, they lock the doors.
Mhm.
They want to see your W-2. I don't care how much you're contributing to this church in terms of, what you bring, the people you bring in. No, how much money you putting in my pocket. That's how we measure if you're a good Christian or not.
But
And years ago, yes, it happened, but it didn't happen on the scale today. Back in the day, we knew about Reverend Ike. Now
no,
everybody wants to be Reverend Ike.
Reverend Ike didn't hide it.
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
He
Reverend
didn't.
Ike didn't hide
He
it.
sure
didn't.
He was very truthful about what he
Mhm.
was doing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
You
had
can't
to-
lose with the
he-
stuff I use.
Hello.
Right. Mhm.
So people really, what could you really say?
Right.
Because you knew what it was.
Mhm.
He gave you the opportunity to make an informed decision
Mhm.
about whether or not you were going to follow what he said or
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
Lies, the deception, how about this? The manipulation,
Mhm.
because that's where we started with this show last week. We started talking about manipulation. So
Mhm.
if we're going to start talking about, Ron, you don't want to start me with the whole religiosity.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
get
yeah.
You don't want to start me.
I get it.
And got us
I
on
get
both
it.
sides of it.
Okay.
I get it. Because I'm not a religious person at all.
No.
Right? Zero. But I do know that
He's the ex-bishop.
we had some degree of morality, some degree of love we had for one another. Hanging out on the corner, if a man or woman walked by, immediately you stop whatever you were doing. Hey, Mr. Smith. Hey, Mr. Smith. Can I carry your bags for you? Nowadays, people are afraid to walk past these young dudes on the corner.
So would you agree,
Mm-hmm.
right, that instead of us trying to push the religious thing, which I'm going to stand on as bondage,
Mhm.
maybe what we
Mhm.
need to be trying to push with people is how about just try to live righteous?
Absolutely.
Just try to live a righteous life.
Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
My name is David. I'm calling from Texas.
Hello, David.
Hi.
Hey.
I have to apologize because I tried to listen to the show, and for some reason on the internet it wasn't coming through. So I'm not even up to topic or anything that's coming on. I called the number in hopes that I would be able to listen some before the conversation took place. So if you just want to tell me what you were talking about, I don't know. Maybe I don't fit.
Well, we were talking about the question that we raised last week, and we're continuing this week is, are women in general angry with men? And are black women in particular angry with black men? And do they have a reason to be? And I see Renee is joining us. Hey, Renee, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Ron? Hey,
Good.
Melody and Roman Day. Hey, Terry. Good, how are you?
So, David, did you hear the topic?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you have a comment?
Do the women that you're speaking to agree that that's true?
Well, surprisingly, the two ladies with me are more pro-man than I thought. They have,
And don't say nothing funny there.
overcome all the anger and frustration, and they realize that it is about doing the work and evolving, right? And these ladies have evolved. But for those that have not, there are still many sisters who are angry with black men.
That's
And do
because
you
they're
think they
seasoned.
have a reason to be?
That's because we what, Tom?
Seasoned.
Well, you know, I feel as though some of them have reason to be, but I think that some of them need to be more mad with themselves than, you know, focusing outside of themselves. You got to understand that, you know, in the black community, a lot of single parent homes are taking place, and a lot of those single parents are the women who are raising the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is not a new phenomenon. I mean, it's been going on for probably a couple of generations. So the very men that they're mad at would be men that they raised.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. So in other
Um,
words, you're saying that the women are raising these no account men that other women are now becoming angry with. Did I get that right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
but David, what is the responsibility of the men who impregnate these women? What is their responsibility? I mean, yeah, you say the women are raising them, but they're raising them alone without
Right.
any input from the man. So what responsibility does the man have?
Well, the man has the responsibility to be a part of the kid's life. I'm looking at it from the perspective of not where we wish to be, but exactly where we are. There's a multitude of factors that have caused some men to be absent. There are some women who chose men and had children with them when they had no intent on, you know, being with them in the first place, you know, for any extended period of time. So it's a multitude of factors that's involved. So what I'm saying is, versus having anger, I think when we talk about that, it's a matter of where we are, and the kids have to be raised, males and females. You know, where are the females who are being raised, and how are they being raised to address a man? You know, if they're raised to be mad at a man, if they're raised that men are no good, then of course that's just gonna perpetuate the whole idea, it's gonna perpetuate the anger.
I think
How
I
are we
concur.
raised? How do we look at society at large? What are the value systems that we're looking at? Are we just randomly being angry?
I think sometimes, like I said last week, I think sometimes it's not that they're angry at every man, it's just misdirected anger. So maybe based on an experience that they had, they are now just walking around because they haven't healed.
Right.
It's not so much that I'm angry with you, I'm just angry,
Right.
right? And so until I heal, hurt people hurt other people.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you just go around broken and you really not taking the time that you need to take to heal so that you're ready for another relationship.
See,
And-
I
and-
think that even in the conversation, when I posed my first idea, it was said that these women are raising the no account men. I mean, we're already labeling men as no account. How many men count for something versus the no account? You know what I'm saying?
Well, we
What
covered
is the
that.
perception of what a black man is to black women, and what his perception of a black man is in the society? Because there's a whole lot of good brothers out there.
And you know
they
what?
get labeled in.
We all agree with you. There are a lot of
Mhm.
good brothers out
Mhm.
there. However, when I thought about this show, I wanted brothers to look at things maybe from a woman's perspective. And I know it's difficult. Now, what I mean by that is, I think that a lot of what you see is reflective of black women responding to what they believe we want to see. I think that a lot of women's fashions, a lot of women's behavior is based on their belief that this is what I need to do to get a man. So you see a lot of black women, right, went to hair weave, went to going blonde, went to surgical procedures to augment certain aspects of,
Right.
their bodies. And after all that, some of us still reject them and still refer to them as a female dog. So if you're going to do
Right.
all of this to what you believe, what you perceive as to, be what the man wants you to be, and then to be rejected after all of that, I don't know, brother, how would you feel?
Well, I mean, think about this now. My true belief, and I don't want to offend nobody, is that women really run this because they have half the money and all the you know what. And when I turn around and see young brothers running around with their pants below their butt, if they weren't getting attention from young women, they'd have their pants up around their neck.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
I would.
You agree with that whole statement?
So,
I agree with the part about the
So
pants pulled up. Yes.
I think
but I'm
that
just,
I think he mentioned, I just gotta interject. I think he mentioned that women are running around with half the money and all of the rest of the stuff. Really, I don't think that's what's going on. I think that women are raising other women to be independent they're raising them to be independent instead of raising them to be a wife, right? And they need to be raising them. They need to raise them to be able to be self-sufficient and to be able to have the skills needed to be a wife, because you can't be in a partnership and be independent. So when you teach women that all this is all about being independent, how do you maintain independence and be in a partnership?
Mhm.
Those are complete polar opposites. So
Right.
and women today are CEOs, they are owning their own businesses. So they're not coming to the table with half the money. Some of them are coming to the table with all the money, right? So when you talk about women coming to the table.
How about if women were teaching young women how to choose a man versus looking and paying attention to all the ones that have all the qualities that they say they don't want versus focusing on the ones who do have the good qualities, or focusing on the ones who have the ability to become better.
You know
And
what?
are making that effort.
I think I have an answer to that. And I think that we're told that we marry our mothers. Women marry their fathers, right? What you seek in a mate, usually you develop very young. From a healthy relationship with a man, if you have a good relationship with a man, you're less likely to accept a bad relationship from some dude. So I think it's not a woman that can teach them. I think it's their relationship with a man that teaches them a healthy relationship.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree. I
But,
agree
I
with
mean, do you think it's up to a man to teach the young women? Do you feel like that responsibility, or, well, I know part of that responsibility definitely does, but do you feel like the major part of that responsibility would be on the male?
I think it's the
Because
responsibility of the man.
they've never been a female. They never had to deal with female problems. They never had to see things from a female perspective. And I think we lose when we expect everybody to be the same. Men and women are completely, totally different.
Well, let me ask you a question, David.
They're totally different.
Well, let me ask you a question, David. Do you have any daughters?
Yes.
Okay. So as a father, if you love your daughter, right? And if you show your daughter that you love her, and not just by giving her things, but by that time you spend with her, right? That time you can never get back. That time you spend with her, the attention you show her,
that.
she will now seek that in a man. She's not going to go for the guy with his pants falling off his behind because my daddy wouldn't allow it. And my daddy never dressed like that, never behaved like that, never conducted himself like that. So it's not your responsibility to teach her to be a woman, but it is your responsibility to teach her about love, loving herself and you loving her.
And I know you'll agree with this, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
He also teaches her how to be treated. And I know I told
Absolutely.
you this before.
Right.
I think I was like 12 or 13. And my father called me. I was in a broken home. And my father called me on the phone, who was very active. But he called me and said, get ready. I'm going to come and pick you up. And he said, put on something pretty. And so, Mom, I got to get dressed. Dad's coming to get me. And he took me in this beautiful, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in New York back in the day, they had like the OJ service, the car service.
Mm-hmm.
He came, he picked me up in an OJ. He took me to dinner. While we were at dinner, I had flowers. He gave me this pretty little jewelry box that had a necklace in it. Took me to see a show. And then afterwards on the way home, he said, I was like, Dad, I had so much fun. And he said, I want you to remember this because this is how you're supposed to be
treated. Yes.
And that stayed with me forever.
Yeah.
And I only say that to say the men have to be responsible to teach the young women how they should be treated, to emulate how they should be treated. And then the women have to be responsible to teach them how to be feminine and to be comfortable being feminine.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it takes practice. I think I'm fortunate because I even have sons who now see that mom is okay with being feminine. So I allow them to take the lead and I'm feminine. And I sit there and say, you go ahead. And Chris is the oldest now. And I say, Chris, you decide. You decide what's going to be done. And then in turn, guess what happens? They treat me like the softer vessel. And I think when women become comfortable with being feminine, again, if you don't get treated that way, it's not you, it's him, right? So, but once you are comfortable with being feminine, everything flows because when it's real masculine energy and you comfortable being feminine, remember I said this before, you don't have to demand submission. Real masculine enery, when it presents itself, the feminine energy, she's going to submit herself naturally.
Absolutely.
Because she feels safe and secure.
She feels safe and secure, and that's the key there.
Yes. So there it is.
Right. I agree with everything that you're saying, and I believe that the teaching process that you're talking about is the young people learning, having an example of what their role would be. What their role would be in a relationship. You know what I'm saying? If you have, like you were speaking before about women going out and making their own money and doing this and doing that, okay, so what role is that teaching? Teaching her the role that I don't need a man?
Well,
I have to make it, have it all on my own. Does that give them any example of being able to collaborate with somebody and build something together?
I think a lot of what happens, sometimes what you hear is just pure frustration, right? Because there are a lot of women across this country, black, brown, whatever skin tone, that are frustrated because they've done the work, right? They went to school, they got the degree, they have the home, they have the car, they have the bank account. But to find somebody to be with them, that life partner, that becomes difficult. And when you run across, and let me tell you something. By trade, I was a police officer. Been retired a number of years now, but I was a cop. So you might have 50 interactions with a police officer, but the one that goes bad is the one you always remember, right? So you going out on dates, and the one dude that was just a complete knucklehead, that's the one you remember, right? And you want to avoid an interaction like that again. So your guard goes up, right? And I think a lot of these women have their guard up. because they're not looking to get into a bad relationship, a destructive relationship. And you know something, let's be realistic. Guys, we got our guard up too. You know what I mean? You turn on social media, you see the sisters, you know, scantily clad and they're gyrating around. Come on, brother.
Hate it.
We got our guard up like, no, you know, I see what you selling. I'm just not buying. Right?
Don't want it.
Right. Because I know what this leads to.
She put herself right out of the market.
I know what this leads to, right? Not going down that path. So we all have a guard up, right? And we want to protect ourselves, protect our emotions. And I think that's natural. It's healthy, right? To some degree.
Yeah. Oh, I think. Yeah, I think.
You know, I agree with that, and it's just I'm gonna give you this analogy. If a lady wants a red dress, and she goes to the store to buy a red dress, she knows she wants a red dress. And when she goes to the store, most of the dresses are blue. Will she buy a blue dress and wear it till it turns red? Or will she fumble through all the blue dresses till she finds the red dress that she wants? Because that's her making a choice, a conscious choice of what she wants and what she doesn't want, and what she's willing to accept and what she's not willing to accept. And I agree with you, brothers need to step up. I think at every opportunity, the good brothers need to try to impart some knowledge to the other brothers. But if the other brothers are looking at those women who present themselves in a way that, you know, they don't have respect for them, but they get with them anyway, then they change their viewpoint of women. And then we live in a society where, you know, dating used to be you had to go pick her up and take her out and wine and dine, or you know, have a certain amount of respect for it and at least be able to have some kind of conversation. But these days, they can go on the internet, swipe left and right, and have their pick. So I say this all the time: the world that we grew up in no longer exists.
That's true.
And the world that we live in can't be judged by the standards of the world we grew up in.
I'm going to jump in
be
for
an
that.
evolution. And it's not going to come from us.
I'm gonna just jump in and say, having your heart set on the red dress and being determined to find the red dress is wonderful, as long as you being realistic with the red dress.
Absolutely.
And see, that's another problem with the sisters. That again, there comes that thing with the high value man. Like everybody hates Kevin. All the women hate Kevin. They hated Kevin Samuels, right? I watched him all the time.
Great guy.
I learned
I don't
a
think
lot.
anybody hated him, though. I think a lot of women listened to him.
He told the truth, but all the women couldn't take it. They hated him because he told the truth.
But I think they hated him because maybe his presentation wasn't great, right? But the message was on point.
All the time.
The whole thing about his tone and this and that and the other. I mean, I've had this experience myself. Okay, I have a friend that I've known for many years. Okay, this particular friend has multiple children by multiple fathers, and I proceeded to ask her the question of, and I explained to her and framed it that, you know, I'm asking this for the simple reason of I want to understand. I want to understand from a woman's perspective how this happens, right? And even in me asking that question, she was offended because she felt that it was an attack on her and her choices, when it wasn't. It was just a matter of wanting to understand. And I asked her, I said, what is it about me asking the question that bothered you? And then she said, well, maybe it was your tone. I'm saying, well, I'm talking the same way I'm talking now. I don't understand that, because if we can't get to a point where we don't take everything personally, and if we don't get to a point where we feel we have to argue for our mistakes, versus understanding them and making a different choice, or say, I would have done this different, I would have done that different, or this was my perspective at that point, then we can't even have the conversation.
Well, you know what? You mentioned a woman that has multiple children, right? Well, that would indicate, I guess, that she has multiple fathers, right? Well, where were they? And here's the problem I see. We produced Elijah Muhammad. We produced Malcolm X. We produced Dr. King. What are we producing now? For Black folks, we've always been looking for leadership. We've always had a leader, but we've been looking in the wrong places for our leadership. But right now, when you talk about
interrupted, nobody's polishing.
I get it. But right now, what are we producing? We're at a critical time in our history, right? For Black folks in this country and for this world. It's a critical time. What are we producing? We can't do the same things because it's not working. So when you talk about judging the current on the past, I think you can, because you can't have a future without a past. And if it worked a decade ago, a century ago, it can work today. But I think we've gotten so far from who we are as a people, our morality, our culture, our history, who we are, that now we're just lost, completely lost. And what we're producing is another generation after generation of dysfunction. And I appreciate you calling in, because what that does is it starts a dialogue. And we desperately need the dialogue. We need to sit and talk with our sisters so that they can understand where we're coming from and we can understand where they're coming from. And I said this last week when we began this conversation. What we need to do as brothers is to listen and hear what some of these sisters are saying, because you find that there are so many women that never had their chance, the opportunity to speak out. And when you talk about people being damaged, right? Or when you talk about women being angry, sometimes what happened in their childhood. It might not be a dating relationship. Mm-hmm. It could be something that happened to them in their childhood that made them guarded, that made them fearful, that made them always looking for that abuse to come. And that is something that, it takes time and getting the help she needs to break away from that. Mm-hmm. And the same could be said for so many young men. These guys out, like you mentioned, the guys with the pants falling off their behind, where did that come from?
Jail.
That's not us. That's not who we were. So something has to change. It has to begin with us. We have to reach out to the young ladies, to young men. We need to have these conversations. And even though they may not want to listen, something always seeps in.
Something always seeps in.
Something always seeps in. Because I know my father used to talk to me all the time. And now my father's been gone for 4 years, but I can still clearly hear what he said to me from when I was a teenager. Right. So those are things that we really need to do, as a people, if we're going to survive. And if we're going to have healthy relationships, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you said the brothers have to listen. And remember I said last week, the sisters have to listen.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to be ready to hear what the men are saying about what they feel like we're doing wrong. Stop complaining because they're going outside of our culture if we're not ready to listen to the reasons why they are going outside away from Black women. Because they are. And it's not all about they want a trophy. Some do, but it's not all about that. They feel like we're difficult. And so we have to, start with the man in the mirror, right? Or woman in the mirror.
And I think, David, what you said was about the woman who didn't want to really talk about her relationships. That's just sensitivity, right? All of us have had, wounds And sometimes it's very sensitive to touch it,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And for her, that's a very sensitive issue.
Mhm.
You know, she realizes, hey, I may have made some bad mistakes, right? My choices were not always the best.
You know, whether they were bad or not, I'm not judging bad or not, because, like you say, these heroes in our history were born. So I personally feel that everybody who has been born is supposed to be here, regardless
Absolutely.
of how they got here
Mhm.
or what path they came through to get here. I truly believe that if they were born to this world, that they have a purpose here that they can serve. I truly believe that.
But I have to say this, Dave, right?
David.
David.
Mhm.
David, I'm a therapist, and you mentioned something about your tone didn't change and the timing didn't matter. But even in therapy, when I deal with clients, right, I'm careful that I don't give them my personal tone. They get my therapeutic tone. And how about this? If you're a man I'm talking to and you make me angry, you might get my therapeutic tone too, because I just bring it down, right? But in addition to that, even in therapy, we don't come into session number 1 or 2 and I'm confronting the client. That doesn't happen. So everything is with timing too. So it may take me 10 sessions to get to the point where I say, did you ever stop to think about blah, 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 right? So the same thing when you are getting in the getting to know me phase, right? We don't go on 2 dates and you start inquiring about my relationships, because I'm sorry, in a very feminine tone, I would tell you none of your business. We're not even there yet, right? But so everything is timing, and it is presentation as well, because you get more when your tone is right. And the same thing in practice, I get more from a client when I'm speaking in a certain tone. And I've had people talk to me that are not clients, and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better since I spoke to you. Your whole tone was just so nice, right? And that's just something that I've always had. I just brought it into what I do. But it is important. And so, David, I would just say, slow and steady wins the race. Right? Slow and steady and nice and smooth wins the race.
I understand. And I've been a coach for a lot of years, and I've helped a lot of people through a lot of different things. And I can appreciate what you're saying. I want to just kind of go back and emphasize the fact that this was not a stranger, and this was not a therapist. This was somebody that I've known for years. Watched her kids grow. I've known her grandmother that had been close to the whole family for a long, long time. So we weren't just meeting each other. We've had all kind of conversations before. But as you said, some people have certain wounds, and this particular conversation touched a nerve with her. And I realized that. And I asked her how I should have done different. And she said she didn't know. So if you don't know what it is about a situation that has offended you, then how can you tell somebody or show somebody or teach somebody or help somebody to know how to do it better? I only know that this was a conversation that I wanted to have. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And with the permission of both parties to have the conversation, I think that we should examine ourselves in the process. If a nerve was struck, say, hey, that hit me wrong. And try to figure out within ourselves why that hit them wrong.
Or just determine whether or not you're the one to have that conversation with. Because I have friends that I've had for 30, 40 years, but I'm not having those intimate conversations with them about my relationships. Love you anyway, but those are the intricacies. How about this? Those are that's the fabric of my life. And not everybody
so
gets.
We just not have the conversation?
Maybe not. That's what you have to determine.
Maybe that conversation
how do we
is for
get
someone
from
else.
where we are to where we want to be without any kind of conversation.
You know what? I think that, and we're actually running out of time, but I think that
Okay, I'm sorry.
what I'm saying is that I think there's a time and a place for everything. You know, sometimes, right, people are at a stage in their life where they're open. And if you catch them at that time, they will open up to you and share some of their most intimate secrets.
Mhm.
But it has to be at the right time,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I think timing is
Yeah,
is
timing
everything.
is timing is everything. But you know, David, I really appreciate you calling in, and you're right. We need to have more discussions. We need to talk. We need to share with one another. So as Romane said, love is understanding one another. And we need to come to that point where we understand one another. And if we understand one another, we relate to one another and we can have healthy, loving relationships. But David, I'm so glad you called in. I hope you will continue to listen in and share with us. Call in, let us know what you think, because none of us know it all. So say hi to the folks down there in Texas for us and tell them all to tune in to Gynesis Radio.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, folks, you know, it's been another interesting conversation we had. And, you know, we can just go on talking for days, months, and years, because if that's what it takes, that's what we got to do. But we're going to be back again next week, and we're going to have another good topic to discuss. And we're going to always do our best to bring you the best. So y'all have a good weekend. Y'all take care.
All right.